to see him once. He was in one of the private hospitals in the city.
What really happened to Donny Hathaway in his final moments? How did a man with such a beautiful voice and talent face such a tragic end? Was there more to his story than fans ever knew? Why did his life take such a heartbreaking turn? What struggles was he dealing with before his passing? Let's look into the truth behind the tragedy of Donny Hathaway's final moments.
I'm gonna stop you from saying goodbye.
From the deep sadness of the blues to the powerful beauty of a symphony, music connects to every feeling we have. Donny Hathaway was someone who could capture all these feelings in his music. He wasn't just a singer, he was a rare kind of musician, the kind you don't find anymore. Donny's voice was pure and full of emotion, like it came straight from his soul. Listening to his music felt like wrapping yourself in a warm blanket on a cold day. He didn't just sing, he played the piano beautifully and wrote songs that touched hearts. Other musicians respected him because he wasn't just talented, he was extraordinary.
In those days, I used to think that we had two geniuses on Atlantic, Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles. When Donny Hathaway signed up, I announced to one and all that I think we have found our third genius.
Did you know he started singing and playing piano professionally when he was only 4 years old? By the age of 6, he was already writing his own songs. It became clear he had a gift, something special that made him stand out. People often called him a musician's musician, someone even other artists admired deeply. As his career grew, Donny became a star. His songs were loved by fans everywhere, and he seemed to have it all. But behind the success, something wasn't right. His behavior began to change. He told people he could hear voices and believed others were trying to steal his music. These struggles made it hard for him to work, and things only got worse. Born on October 1st, 1945, in Chicago, Illinois. His mother, Drella Huntley, was a stay-at-home mom, and his father, Hosea Brown, was a serviceman who had been affected by World War II. Sadly, his parents separated shortly after he was born. When Donny was 3 years old, his mother found it hard to raise him alone. So she moved back to live with her own mother, Martha Crummell, in St. Louis, Missouri. Donny's grandmother had a big influence on his life. Her love for music and the church inspired him. Donny's work would eventually show just how much he was inspired by the church. His work, even now, is always an experience, a mix of the gospel roots and raw emotion that could make you feel everything all at once. He had this rare gift, a way of blending storytelling with melodies so hauntingly beautiful that they'd stick with you for days. Even if you didn't know his name, you'd probably recognize his work. It's that unforgettable.
I like to do blues as a reflection on a period, past and present, in black people's lives, because it is the secular side of the religious music that we had in our church.
When Donny was just 4 years old, he surprised everyone at church by rushing to the front to sing with his grandmother during one of her performances. The congregation loved it, and so did his grandmother. She realized he had a special gift. From then on, Martha helped nurture Donny's talent. She took him to church practices and even brought him along when she toured the Midwest. He became known as Little Donny Pitts, the nation's youngest gospel singer. At home, Donny would imitate preachers, showing his love for performing and music.
He was writing, he was performing, he was producing, you name it.
While he loved gospel music and church, his dreams started to grow even bigger as he got older. In high school, Donny received classical piano training. This opened new doors for him, and he decided to focus on a professional music career. After graduating, he earned a scholarship to Howard University in Washington, D.C. There, he studied music education and music theory.
The main thing is to seek as much education as you can get.
When he was a student at Howard University, he didn't just stick to his formal music classes. He explored jazz, blues, and soul music outside of school, genres that would later shape his amazing music career. One important moment came when he met fellow student and drummer Rick Powell. Rick was putting together a band for a local nightclub and needed a pianist. At first, he asked Harold Wheeler, but Harold wasn't available. So Harold recommended Donny, his talented friend from St. Louis. Now, as you can probably imagine, Donny grew up with strict rules about music. His grandmother raised him to focus on classical and church music, believing other genres were devil's music. Despite this, Rick convinced him to audition. He played the piano and sang for the club owner, who was so impressed that Donny got the job. Together with Rick, they formed the Rick Powell Trio. This job wasn't just about money. It helped him grow as a professional musician. On campus, his talent was already turning heads. Fellow student Leroy Hudson called Donny a genius. The two became close friends and even roommates. On April 4, 1968, tragedy struck when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. This heartbreaking event inspired Donny and Leroy to write The Ghetto, a song that would later become a huge success.
Yes, this is the ghetto.
He didn't stop there. He directed the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity choir and formed a vocal group called the Cavaliers, named after the apartment building where many of them lived. Around this time, Curtis Mayfield, the legendary soul musician, was looking for fresh talent for his Curtis Records label. Curtis heard about the Cavaliers and arranged an audition. The group performed a song Donny had rearranged so creatively that Curtis and his bandmates didn't even recognize it at first. They were blown away. Curtis signed the group, renamed them the Mayfield Singers, and invited him to work at Curtis Records in Chicago. Donny saw this as a once-in-a-lifetime chance and decided to leave Howard University to join Curtis Records. Curtis Mayfield admired his musical brilliance and often said he was destined for greatness.
He had broken into the studio scene with Chess Records for the Staple Singers, for Stax, Philip Church. He did Curtis's stuff, so it was a step up for him as a musician.
Also, he got noticed by important people in the music industry. One of them was guitarist Phil Upchurch, who believed in his potential. Phil even helped Donny get opportunities at Chess Records. His big break came in 1969 when he recorded his first song. It was a duet with June Conquest called I Thank You Baby. The B-side of the record was Just Another Reason. While Donny was grateful for the chance to work at Curtis Records, he and Curtis Mayfield didn't always agree. They both had strong personalities and different ideas about music. Feeling held back, Donny asked to leave Curtis Records so he could have more freedom. Curtis agreed. After leaving Curtis, he wanted to take control of his music career. He teamed up with his old friend Rick Powell, and together they started their own company, Don Powell Publishing. Donny began working on songs with Leroy. Some of their early songs included The Ghetto, Trying Times in Our Ages, or Our Hearts. Meanwhile, another Howard University graduate, Roberta Flack, was making waves in the music world. Les McCann, a big name in the industry, discovered her talent and helped her get a deal with Atlantic Records.
Roberta Flack had her first album. It was called First Take. And Donny had two songs on that. One was called Trying Times, and the other one was called Our Ages, Our Hearts.
Roberta's first album, First Take, featured two of Donny's songs, Trying Times
The whole thing is getting out of
and Our Ages or Our Hearts.
my darling, what will it be?
The album's success caught the attention of important people at Atlantic. Jerry Wexler, one of the big names at Atlantic Records, wanted to sign Donny and Rick. They agreed to join Atco Records, a part of Atlantic, but only if they could still publish their own songs.
In those days, I used to think that we had two geniuses on Atlantic, Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles. When Donny Hathaway signed up, I announced to one and all that I think we have found our third genius.
Donny and Rick formed Don Rick Enterprises and released The Ghetto, Part 1. The song was a hit and climbed the charts, making Donny even more famous. Not everyone was happy about Donny's success. Curtis Mayfield, who saw Atco Records as a rival, wasn't pleased. He convinced Leroy Hudson to leave Donny and join him at Curtis Records. Despite this setback, he kept moving forward. In this period, Donny recorded This Christmas. Though it wasn't a huge hit at the time, it became a holiday favorite years later when it was re-released in 1991. His success with The Ghetto led Atco to ask him to record a full album. With Rick Powell by his side, Donny created Everything is Everything. This album showed Donny's incredible range as an artist, blending different styles of black music. Donny poured his soul into every song. His first album, Everything is Everything, was like a mission for him. It wasn't just music, It was a cultural statement. Tracks like Misty showed how easily Donny could mix different musical styles into something magical.
I get misty holding your hand.
Sugar Leaf was a special nod to his time at Howard University. And Thank You, Master, for My Soul was his way of expressing deep gratitude for his musical gift. One of the standout songs on the album was To Be Young, Gifted, and Black. It was about realizing your potential and inspired many young African Americans. The album also showed Donny's amazing skills. He wrote, arranged, produced, and sang each track. The opening song, Voices Inside, Everything is Everything, was especially interesting. The lyrics, I hear voices, I see people, could hint at his later struggles with schizophrenia. But at the time, the song was meant to celebrate community and the energy of daily life. Even with his success, Donny sometimes struggled with sadness. People he worked with noticed moments when he seemed deeply unhappy. Still, he didn't let that stop him. In 1971, he released his second album, Donny Hathaway, which included soulful covers of popular songs. His partnership with Roberta Flack was another high point. Their duet, You've Got a Friend, was a big hit and reached the top 10 on the R&B charts.
And you know wherever I am.
Donny and Roberta released a duet album, Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. Their song, Where Is the Love, became a massive hit, topping the R&B charts and reaching the top 5 on the pop charts.
You told me that you didn't love him.
It even won a Grammy, and the album went gold. His talent didn't stop at singing. He also worked on TV and film soundtracks. He created the theme song for the TV show Maude and wrote music for the movie Come Back Charleston Blue. That same year, Donny released Donny Hathaway Live, an album recorded during concerts in Los Angeles and New York. The live album became one of the most celebrated in music history and peaked at number 4 on the R&B charts.
All you had to do was listen to him sing and play, and you would discern the elements of a very, very gifted individual.
Yes, Donny was a gifted musician whose music touched the hearts of many. But behind his success, he faced deep struggles with his mental health. Donny battled a condition called paranoid schizophrenia, which caused him to experience extreme anxiety and paranoia. Friends believed the pressures of fame and his trusting nature made him vulnerable to people in the music industry who put their own interests above his well-being. In the early 1970s, Donny's mental health began to decline. Between 1973 and 1974, he was hospitalized multiple times and officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. According to experts, schizophrenia is a serious brain disorder. When it is active, it can cause symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, and difficulty thinking clearly. While there is no cure yet, there are treatments available that can help manage the symptoms.
I went to see him once. He was in one of the private hospitals in the city.
During his worst times, Hathaway's wife, Eulalia, shared that he was taking dozens of medications daily. While these medicines helped calm his symptoms, they also made it hard for him to create music. Even so, when Donny had good days, he was incredibly productive. He was also a loving father to his children. Unfortunately, these periods of stability became less and less frequent. Donny also released an album called Extensions of a Man, which received critical praise. But soon after, his personal struggles took over, and he disappeared from the spotlight. He spent much of his time in hospitals battling his condition. While he was away, rumors spread about him. Some people thought he was in trouble with dangerous groups. Others believed he was silenced for speaking out about civil rights. None of these stories were ever proven true.
Donny was sick. So that's why he peaked as well as he could, but beyond that point, not being on medication, this kind of thing, he had peaked, period.
Those who visited him in the hospital saw how his strange behavior was caused by his illness. Even while he was sick, Donny still played the piano. Music was his escape, but his condition made life very hard. His mood swings created problems in his relationships, leading to a separation from his wife and a pause in his work with his singing partner, Roberta Flack. Donny didn't give up on his music completely. He performed a few times, but his illness often got the better of him. In 1977, he and Roberta came back together to work on a song called The Closer I Get to You.
It was real, the way you make me feel.
They had worked through their differences and created a beautiful track for her album, Blue Lights in the Basement. The song became a huge hit and earned them a Grammy nomination. They even started planning another duet album together. In January 1979, Atlantic Records helped Donny leave the hospital to record songs for the new album. But being in the studio didn't heal him. One day during a recording session, Donny had a frightening episode. He suddenly started screaming and ran out of the recording booth. A writer of The Closer I Get to You, James Mattoom, found him curled up in a corner. Donny was terrified, saying people were trying to kill him and that his brain was connected to a machine stealing his music. On January 13, 1979, Donny and Roberta were in the studio working on their new songs. Later that day, they had dinner at Roberta's apartment with their managers. Everyone said Donny seemed happy and full of life. He was excited about their Grammy nomination and the big new deal for their album. After dinner, Roberta drove Donny and his manager, Ed Howard, to their hotel. Before saying goodnight, Donny joked about the leftover cake from dinner. Roberta promised to get him some more by Tuesday. They said goodbye, not knowing it would be their last moment together.
I don't really have a memory about my dad. I'm like 6 or 7 in that period, so I can only look back on that time now and look at it from now.
Earlier that evening, Donny mentioned to his manager, Ed, that he needed to discuss something important. But before he could say more, he stepped into an elevator. Ed thought, if it's urgent, Donny will call me later. Later that night, around 11 p.m., the Midtown North Police Station in New York City got a troubling call. Someone had either fallen or jumped from the 15th floor of the Essex House on Central Park South. Tragically, that person was Donny Hathaway. When the police arrived, they looked closely at the situation. They said Donny had taken his own life, but some things didn't make sense. There was no suicide note in his room, which was locked from the inside. His belongings, including his music tapes and sheet music, were all untouched. Everything seemed normal except the window in his room was wide open on that cold, rainy winter night. Even more puzzling, the safety glass from the window had been neatly placed on the bed. Ed got a call from the building's security, telling him something had happened. Moments later, a guard knocked on his door to share the devastating news. Donny was gone. Ed was heartbroken and shocked. He couldn't stop wondering what Donny had wanted to tell him earlier that night. When the news of his death spread, his fans and friends were in disbelief. Many struggled to accept the way he had died. Rumors started swirling, and people began coming up with their own theories. Some thought someone close to Donny might have harmed him, seeing him as more valuable dead than alive. Others believed his mental health struggles made him unpredictable, leading to foul play by people in the music industry, and their talks about it been suicide. Some believed that personal struggles, including rumors about his sexual orientation clashing with his strong religious beliefs, led to his sadness and guilt. Others thought that his struggles with taking his medication may have made his mental health worse, pushing him to a breaking point.
She said when he would take his medicine, he would be fine. When he didn't, she said she could take him for maybe 2 or 3 days and then would need a break. What she meant by that, I can only imagine.
At Donny's funeral, Reverend Jesse Jackson offered a different view. He suggested that Donny's death could have been an accident. He reminded people that Donny had a habit of leaning out of windows as a child, pretending that the birds were his congregation, as if he were preaching to them. This story painted a picture of Donny as someone who had a deep connection with the world around him, but it didn't make the reason for his death any clearer. Many famous people attended the funeral, including Roberta Flack, Stevie Wonder, and Donny's grieving mother, who was heartbroken by the loss of her son. Donny left behind 3 daughters, Ulala, Donald, and Kenya, also known as KK. Ulala and Kenya have both followed in their father's footsteps, becoming singers and continuing his musical legacy. Donny's daughter Donta leads the Donny Hathaway Legacy Project, which not only honors her father, but also helps artists struggling with mental health, a cause close to Donny's own heart. Leaner notes for later releases of his final solo album explain, Donny is no longer here, but the song Someday We'll All Be Free gathers momentum as part of his legacy. Donny literally sat in the studio and cried when he heard the playback of his final mix. It's pretty special when an artist can create something that wipes them out. Edward Howard, lyricist of the song, adds, "It was a spiritual thing for me. What was going through my mind at the time was Donny, because Donny was a very troubled person. I hoped that at some point he would be released from all that he was going through. There was nothing I could do but write something that might be encouraging for him. He's a good leader for young black men."
Yes, this is the ghetto.
Donny Hathaway would always be known as one of the greatest soul singers ever, and his music still touches many people today. According to Allison Keyes from NPR, Donny's solo recordings are some of the foundation of American soul music. His songs have influenced many artists, from R&B stars like Alicia Keys and Aaliyah to rapper Common and even George Benson, a singer and guitarist. In 2010, Rolling Stone magazine even named Hathaway the 49th greatest singer of all time. Many other famous artists also praised Donny. Justin Timberlake, a pop star, has said that Hathaway is the best singer of all time. Raul Midon, another musician, called Hathaway the strongest soul singer that ever existed and compared his singing style to classical singers. Stevie Wonder, one of the most famous singers in the world, said, "When Donny sings any song, he owns it." These are just a few examples of how highly other artists think of Hathaway. Even Amy Winehouse, a famous singer who passed away too soon, called Hathaway her favorite artist of all time. She even mentioned him in her song Rehab, calling him Mr. Hathaway. This shows just how much Hathaway's music meant to her and how it influenced her style. Rock critic Robert Christgau also shared his thoughts on Hathaway. He called Hathaway a synthesizer of limitless cultural aspiration, meaning Hathaway could blend different music styles, like pop, jazz, blues, and gospel, into his own unique sound. He also noted that Hathaway's music had deep roots in black culture, which made his style very special. Some people felt that Hathaway's music could sometimes be a bit too complex, but no one can deny how powerful and emotional his voice is. In short, Donny Hathaway is one of the most important figures in soul music. His powerful voice, his mix of musical styles, and his influence on other artists have made him a legend in the music world. Many of today's artists continue to be inspired by Hathaway's work, and his music still resonates with listeners around the world.